What I'd like to do tonight, if you don't mind, the topic was trends and challenges, and I think it's probably important for me to, if you don't mind, start in the beginning. There's going to be some significant changes coming in Minneapolis Fire in the next 2 months, pending my retirement January 30th. And if I could talk a little bit about where we were at and where we're at now, and things you're going to see in the future, especially with frequencies. I've been with the department 29 years, and I've been a fire marshal for 5 years. And for some of those of you that have dealt with Minneapolis Fire in the past, the way it was staffed prior to my arrival was with the walking wounded with firefighters on the suppression side. And the philosophy was that the Prevention Bureau was viewed as the healing arches, and that's literally what it was, is that firefighters would come up with no skills other than basic tactical firefighting and make code decisions on properties or projects that you were dealing with. As dysfunctional as that seems, it's what the city wanted to do, and when they offered the position to me, I'm a little more aggressive than that, and I had kind of a vision that the way to turn this thing around was to eliminate those firefighters from the pool. So I started behind the scenes before I took the position over, and obviously these were union jobs, and negotiated out of the Local 82 and into the ASME bank and created 6 new positions for professional fire code inspectors. Now, one of the challenges with that was that nobody in the HR system in the city knew what a true fire inspector should be or look like or what the skill level would be, because they never had anything like that. So I did a lot of research, certainly borrowed from the sister city in St. Paul and other communities around the state and nationally. Came up with a pretty good program, Fire Inspector 1, 2, and what I call a fire coordinator. Unfortunately, the city, when they do their analysis of the pay structure, the best I could negotiate with the HR and specifically regulatory services was to compare a fire code inspector to a housing inspector too. Well, now we all know that's kind of ridiculous, but it was a starting point for me. Well, that was approximately 4 years ago. Since that period of time, obviously we've come a long way. I think we've rebuilt a lot of bridges in the communities, and I think, I'd like to think anyhow that we succeeded in that folks that have been in business with my office recognize us that we're a lot better skilled and we want to be on a fair level playing field. Not to say that I haven't had a lot of problems. I have stock problems just like any other business, and I truly look at it as a business. I think I'm a fairly reasonable negotiator. Get my hackles up a little bit, I'll kick you in the knee just like someone would kick me. I've got, in the city of Minneapolis, we have area fire inspectors, and we got people that do plan review. However, my inspectors, if you look at their civil service title, all of them but 3 are working out of their job description. For example, there's a number of you that know Gordy Bates. Well, Gordy Bates, by civil service status, is a plan reviewer. There's a fellow that's working with me that I hired out of Farmington named Brad Schmoll. That's what we call a fire coordinator, which means he's got additional skills to do fire code inspections. However, Gordy's mentoring him to become a plan reviewer. I think Brad has done a real good job, and certainly Gordy's work with him is showing its benefits. Then I have a couple of individuals that do field stuff, like Terry Chevalier does our hydro testing and things like this for those 2 guys. Sherry Grazina, that some of you may know, we've challenged her to become a good fire alarm person to do plan review. She just took her NICET level test on Saturday. She feels pretty optimistic about it. I hope she passes it. Denise Brin, maybe some of you have dealt with her. She's my hazardous material specialist, and she's an excellent inspector in that particular area. And then the other various folks that do site plan review. Mike Raker does hood plan reviews. I guess my point in this is that unlike regulatory services, is that I haven't had the luxury to generate permit fees to hire personnel. And when we had LGA cuts, at the end of the day, the only people that physically laid personnel off was the fire department. We laid off 42 people. Fortunately, Chief Forte looked at the work of the Bureau and we didn't lose any of our staff. We will be looking at another round of cuts next year, and I think more importantly now than ever, that this Bureau needs to be staffed certainly to provide the level of services necessary to folks like yourself. Now, having said that, with my departure, my replacement is a chief that has been the chief of training for the last 5-6 years. He is willing and eager to take up the challenge of this position, but he has no code experience or background in building construction. He's a little concerned about that. In addition to that, I have my hazardous material inspection inspector that's up for an interview on Monday, and we may lose her to another position. So there's going to be new challenges. It gets back to the money. When I hire an inspector in my division, the best money I can give him or her is $42,000 a year. Now that's the person that's going to do the plan review for something that was designed for a hood system that maybe Nardini had sent into us, or sprinkler systems from Viking. Well, it's pretty tough to get a guy or gal to come in with decent skills at $42,000 a year. So I don't know what the new guy's going to do. Right now we're 2 months behind in our work. One of the things that happened to us is that, along with the new mayor, his whole focus was to go to what they call a one-stop shop, and some of you folks have maybe been exposed to that. Well, in order to have a person at a permit counter to ask highly technical questions, they have to have a pretty good skill set. Well, I can't afford to send people like that over there to do that. I can't put a Gordy Bates on a permit counter to answer questions about somebody that might want to sprinkler their garage. It's a waste of resources. That's the direction that the city council wants us to go. So there's going to be that problem. One of the things that I wanted to talk a little bit about was there's a lot of frustration with my office in terms of getting folks out to do an inspection, whether it's a hydro, a rough-in, plan review, and such. Part of the problem, as I mentioned, is by state statute, the building division, in this case, they collect all the dollars for permits. We don't see one nickel. Every bit of that money is sent in the general fund, and regulatory services hires housing inspectors, health inspectors, so on and so forth. We don't see a nickel. Every person that I have on my staff comes right out of the fire department's budget. In other words, we don't put people on fire trucks, put people in my office. What I did is with a lot of research, is I put together a new fire protection system permit fee structure. We are probably one of a few communities that don't charge for fire alarm plan review, hood plan review, tank removals, and such. Well, for some reason, I developed a process. I think it's fair. It's based on all the counties surrounding us, but the mayor has passed a moratorium on no new permit fees because they're getting so many complaints on other things. Well, that's caused a real challenge to my division. I'm looking at a revenue stream of anywhere from $500,000 to $1 million of work that we are currently doing, and another division in the city is taking the money and hiring staff. How does that affect you? I don't have the bodies, is what it does. If they implement this permit system, and I have it completed, it's just a matter of putting it into a computer data system, you'll get the service that you're paying for, because it'd be my staff. One of the keys to the success of that would be that when this system is launched, and I'm hoping the new fire marshal will implement it at least by February, if not March of next year, is that 65% of the permit fee will have to be paid up front before a plan is reviewed. That'll allow him the ability to hire the additional staff necessary to complete those plans on time. And I know a lot of you guys have talked to various companies over the last few years. How come you can't get this done? I think I've been fairly clear. I don't have the people. I just don't. And many of you that know Gordy Bates, he went to a part-time position, so he works about 70% versus 100%, and he's our guy. We average 400 to 500 plans per year, and we probably see another 100 to 150 hood systems. Mike Raker is the guy that's doing that now. We had some problems. We asked some of the industry folks to come in on hood systems. I think we're on the right path with that. But again, I hope that, and we'll have some questions here, I hope you understand that none of this that I've done has been intentional. I'm trying to survive this thing. And I don't know if the next guy will be as successful, because I don't know where the politics are going to go in that city. We did do a business plan in the city. Chief Forte, Chief Seal, and a number of us other chiefs put together a 5-year plan. It's one of the things that's going to make or break our budget this year, and certainly other departments within the city have been challenged to do the same thing. The two primary business lines that we have in that are response, which is obviously our suppression personnel, and prevention, which is my area. When we talk about trends, one of the things that the chief needs to do is look at the NFPA standards, specifically 1710. We've spent a tremendous amount of our time the last year putting together that program so we can get 4 people on a rig. We can maintain our response time, which is under 4 minutes, and all the other typical things you see in a metro city. That has not come without a lot of opposition, specifically from the union that affects. It's a trust issue. If you've heard any of the debate out there, it's we're going to quints. We have a quint concept that we're implementing. We're reducing our apparatus. We could still maintain the response times. We've done a lot of studies on it and modeling. And we can put 14 firefighters on the fire ground under 8 minutes anywhere in the city. That's a pretty good task to put people like that on the fire ground. Our people think of it a little differently. Well, one of the reasons that we feel that that'll work is because of the prevention side, the work that you guys do. The more fire suppression systems we can get into our facilities, the better off we are in negotiating that response time. Our primary business line no longer is firefighting. We go on 70% of our call are EMS calls. You know, maybe the busiest company in the city is going on 4,500 calls, and maybe that company's running about 80% EMS. We don't see a lot of fires. When we did this change and implemented it with the civilian staff 4 years ago, we've seen a 40% reduction in fires in the last 4 years. That speaks volumes to the quality of those people. Now, their personalities sometimes can be a little different, but they've done a great job, you know, and I think they've turned the corner in Minneapolis in terms of code enforcement, and certainly whether it's plan review or field inspections. Most of our fires now come in single-family duplexes or triplexes. Last year we had 450 fires, and roughly 220 of those were in single-family duplex or triplexes. We used to see 50 multiple alarms a year on commercial buildings. I've probably been to 2 this year, and I usually go to every one of them. We just don't see that type of fire problem. Again, the reason for that is, in my opinion, is good work from fire protection engineers, sprinkler contractors, whether it's Hood or any other type of suppression system. And I think my staff's doing a good job at that. When we talk about increasing demands for services, we don't see that trend for our demands on my division changing. As a matter of fact, we wrote an initiative to take over the housing inspections, which has been in the paper in the last couple of months. And calling it a political battle right now would be an understatement. The reason we did that is that in order for us to retain our current staffing level, we had to find new dollars. My staff and I identified $822,000 in fees that were being collected for a service that wasn't being provided. Well, if that thing passes, which I'll know in the next couple of weeks, we'll be doing that with fire suppression personnel, contrary to how they do it across the river. The only reason we did this again was to keep people on our fire trucks so I could maintain the level of staffing I have up in the Bureau. And I can't predict the future, but if they got to cut a lot of folks and they've already cut out of suppression and I can't find dollars, then I'm going to lose more people out of the Bureau, which makes your jobs that much more difficult, the turnaround times, etc. And they're miserable right now. You know, I talked to Gordy before I come out here and he said it's 2 months. You know, I don't know another solution to that particular problem. The other thing that we're doing right now is we're going through an accreditation process, in the city of Burnsville and maybe one other city in the state of Minnesota did that. And again, the reason we're doing that is to help us with our 1710 qualifications that we're trying to get through, and also get us a little more grant money as we focus on emergency preparedness and anything involved with that, whether it's weapons of mass destruction, biological. nuclear, radiological. We just do a lot of work in that area right now. The additional sources of funding in that particular area has been pretty successful. We've gotten a lot of grant money. We are currently in the process of acquiring another grant, but I heard late this afternoon that somebody at the state may have a say on how we dispense those funds. We'll find that out tomorrow, I think. A lot of this change that we're currently going through has made it very difficult, I think, for private sector folks. Certainly this group here and some of the people I mentioned have had a difficult time with my office. The only thing I can say to it is bear with us. I think we've demonstrated a lot of things so far, and I hope Dave Ewald, by the way, is the name of my successor. I hope he's as successful as I've been in the future. The other thing that, if you want to talk about it, I had suggested that if somebody had some questions on the fine line incident and the sprinkler protection and all those types of things, I certainly could talk about that if somebody wanted to ask some questions. I don't want to spend a lot more time on our business plan. The biggest piece I wanted to send that message is this permit system is going to start and will be implemented, and obviously it will cost more money to do business with Minneapolis Fire early next year. But I see that as a good thing. Hopefully it'll get some staff on it. And then the last thing I have is I have a unedited version of the Rhode Island fire that lasts about 16 minutes. The only thing I can say about it is this has not been publicized, and it's not for retaping. But it's kind of difficult to watch, especially the first 4 minutes of it. What you'll see in it, it's time accurate. Nothing's been deleted out of it. The fire expansion in the first 13 seconds is pretty remarkable. So we can either talk about the fine line, I can answer some questions, or maybe some concerns you have with my department, or some gripes. Whichever, I'll open it up to what you want to talk about.
I guess fire-wise, challenge for your department, what do you think, in your opinion, if you could say is the biggest accident waiting to happen in the city of Minneapolis?
Well, maybe I'm leaving the city. If we were to ask, when we talk about weapons of mass destruction and terroristic acts, the biggest accident looking for a place to happen, or if I was the person that wanted to cause one, would be the convention center. Convention Center is a new facility based on a performance-based design. However, there are some things in it that shouldn't happen. As a matter of fact, it's delayed egress. Everything below the first floor has delayed egress. I didn't sign off on the building. I don't think the designer did. And I think if someone wanted to play a little stuff like we had 3 years ago in McDonald's all south with those animal rights folks, that could be a big problem. We have a number of high-rise buildings with a significant population of elderly and physically challenged people that are not sprinklered. And the city of Minneapolis has been on record historically of voting against a retrofit bill for sprinkler protection. I don't think it's a good idea. Those things are still there. In terms of our general fire load, we have a lot of protection. We've done a lot of things in the last 5 to 8 years. You know, we're the only city in the state. Let me restate that. We're one of a few cities in the state that have complete fire protection in our school system. You know, that's a big issue. So, you know, we're not so concerned about the Minneapolis public schools anymore. Certainly there's problems, but it's an educational problem. I get probably 12 fires in the city public schools a year. And it's not the suppression systems, et cetera, it's the principal's attitude about educating people on what's fire life safety. I don't know if that...
You touched them all there. What are you going to do?
It's up in the air. No, I'm not going to fish. I'll just say this, you know, the only reason I'm leaving is because I can't make any money at what I'm doing. I'm in the pension system. If I drop dead talking to you here, my wife gets 18 grand a year with no escalator. So I'm leaving. And I might do something fire life safety. I got a couple architectural friends that want to do something like that. Or I might fish. That won't happen. That costs way too much money. And I'm kind of a type A personality. I'm a little high strung, highly opinionated. So if figure my wife would throw me out by 9.
Is the message about the reduction in fires over the last 4 years making it to the right people, that they're starting to say, hey, where the investment, if you do put more people on or that type of thing, should be going? There's still more return that you can make with additional fire prevention?
Well, unfortunately, that's probably, the message isn't getting out, and unfortunately, it's probably my fault. I'm the type of person where, I think I just go to work, try to do the best I can, and results should speak for themselves. The political process doesn't recognize that. These folks that work for us currently versus where it was at 5 years ago have made tremendous strides, and it's not been easy for them. And I'm not saying they're all top-notch people, everybody's got their faults, but they do a great job for the city, and there is no credit given to them where credit is due. Is that changing? Yeah. In the last month, as the word has gotten out that I'm leaving, kind of like this housing sweep thing that we did, and I met with the U of M on that, and he said, all we need to do is, well, geez, we didn't know that. Well, you should have asked that question 3 years ago, 4 years ago. So, the new guy, maybe, if he keeps up speed, will have more success. It's unfortunate. It's politics.
But Tom, you said your department laid off 42 people and none were in fire prevention. It sounds like somebody got the message.
Well, the
Fire
chief of the
prevention
fire
works in
department,
it.
Chief Forte and Chief Seal.
That's remarkable, really.
Well, I'll tell you what, it's a good point, because a lot of, when you look across the country and historically, the first thing the fire chief cuts is fire education and fire prevention. This chief didn't, and Yuli and Rocco both have completely given me autonomy. The only thing they've ever done in the last 5 years, unless there was some complaints on something within the city, and that, the building official and I aren't going out for coffee, it's just, and people either like me or they don't, it doesn't really matter, I try to do a good job, but they stick their head in for lunch, that's it, period. And without that autonomy, I wouldn't have been a successful contractor, and neither would those folks that work for me. So they've really had free reign, which is a good thing. You don't see that in most fire chiefs today, at least from what I see when I go out to the fire academy, et cetera. So that's been really the tool that's made it work best.
So Tom, do you see it from individuals out there coming to you like with plans with houses or buildings, or is it primarily just contractors bringing projects to you, they're already with plans? Or
Okay, in our review process, it's both pieces that we see, and we see all aspects of the plan. One of the things that they wanted to do with the one-stop shop is do a model after St. Paul. Well, they haven't asked us to come to the table on it, so typically, because folks know us on a project, they'll call Gordy up, or they'll call Brad up, or they'll call me up, and hey, we got this thing going on, we'd like to come and sit and meet with you guys. So we are getting in on the ground floor. Unfortunately, when we look at something like Heritage Park development over there, which was driven by the Holman Decree and affordable housing, a lot of that stuff got well out of the way before it came to us, so we had to really do a lot of running to catch up on that thing and identify a bunch of shortcomings. I think folks are recognizing again that the staff that's working for the Bureau has the skills to do that, so more people are coming. But in defense of the other departments in the city, because of the prior chief, in this Golden Arches healing theme, they had to go and scramble and get the help they needed to serve the contractors out there. So it's, I don't know if I'm explaining it correctly, but I can understand that. I guess what I'm saying is I can understand why over here in regulatory services and well, geez, the fire department was never here before. Well, now we've turned a corner on that, so more of those developers are coming to us. And whether it's sprinkler protection or other types of fire life safety systems, I'll just give you an example. Is that there was a company that developed a bunch of housing sites along the Hiawatha corridor, and they finished them about 2 years ago. And there were just 6 to 8 houses. Well, MCDA had appropriated $2.2 million to do the site plans for roadways to access these particular occupancies. It took me 14 months to get them to change their mind and not spend that kind of money and spend 30 grand per site and put in pavers to get the correct access they needed for these things and not do all this infrastructure improvement. Well, it saved everybody a bunch of money. But it took that to get all these folks recognizing that the Prevention Bureau, they got a couple of folks that know what's going on and they want to do the right thing. So we've turned that corner. Now, I don't know what the new guy's going to experience in that because the planning division has now been brought in with what they call CPED, this new thing for one-stop shop, so that guy's gone. And there's all new people there. So stay tuned. We'll see how it flushes out.
Has the Fine Line Fire and subsequent news, people going into different establishments helped your
The Fine Line, well, let me start it with this. I seen a billboard one time that said a problem is an opportunity to reform. That's what the Fine Line was for us. The reporter from Channel 9 beat up another establishment in the city so bad that, and Gordy Bates, if he was here, he could attest to it. He said, "You'll never get that building sprinkled." Well, I not only got the building sprinkled, got new separations and exit ways put in, cost the guy about $500,000. That was an outcrop of the Fine Line. But what had been done before that is that there's a group called the Downtown Entertainment Task Force. That's a group of bar owners, restaurant owners in the warehouse district, which is chaired by Dario, that Asimo, that owns the Fine Line. And we had been in there on monthly meetings for 3 years prior to that fire, talking about fire life safety stuff, specifically evacuation plans. If you look at Chapter 4 in the IFC, I have a model for evacuation plans that I mandate all places assembly have. They were one of the groups that we highlighted that program with. In the morning of that fire, they had been talking about the Chicago incident. And when that fire broke out, simultaneously, they tried to put the fire out, which it was a little thing. It started the same way with a van. Allegedly, the owners didn't know that they were going to do this. They started the evacuation, activated the 911 system, and our first company was on scene within 90 seconds of the initial call, and that building had been completely evacuated. That was a true success story. The sprinkler system contained the fire, and there was a number of code problems because there were some things that had been done to the building that we didn't know about. For example, ceilings were taken out, and the sprinkler protection hadn't been sprayed back to the deck. Well, so where the fire ended up, the head did not trip there, but once they opened up the exit ways and that horizontal chimney effect took place, it drew the heat across those heads and tripped 7 heads. So a minor fire caused $1.6 million in damage. Sprinkler system did what it was supposed to do, but the damage would have been significantly less had those folks not done what they did. And none of us can control what they do once they're in the building. So as a matter of fact, I think did they write something in the sprinkler journal on that thing? Because they called me on it and I said, I don't think I talked about the sprinkler protection.
This month's NFSA has an article, 5-6 paragraphs on it.
Yeah, you should read it. But we got a lot of horsepower out of it. As a matter of fact, Associated Press did some things, and as I mentioned earlier, that problem, my objective was to take a good outcome, regardless of some of the code complications that were in there, and promote that partnership of private industry and fire service and sprinkler protection and fire alarm systems, and that it works if everybody stays on the same page. And I think we got a lot of headway on it. I got that other bar protected and a number of other places up to speed. And then I got the mayor's attention out of it, so now no pyrotechnics are going off in our city without approval from my office. And the individual that was approving them in the past has since retired, so a lot of changes came out of that. Well, I want to throw this video in, but someone has to, that's more VCR to
Plug it in somewhere.
all right, I'll plug it in. I can handle that piece. Is this the one?
That's on for 4 minutes. Put it on the screen for everything.
certainly as a prevention officer, I really appreciate the hard work that folks like you guys do, because that's an example of what should not happen in our country today. I don't know what it is. I've never seen a tape like that before in my 29 years. Pretty powerful about lack of protection.
Who knows where it'll go?
Any other questions, or?
How many people died in that fire, remember?
I think it's 101, it was 99, then 2 died afterwards, I believe. And actually, you know, what was interesting about that is that the folks that got out in the first like 20, 30 seconds, you seen a guy come out the window in a dark colored jacket. His friend died in the fire, and that kid that died, Dad called me. He's the one that made the presentation, the Rhode Island group on protection in these types of occupancies, and I talked to him a lot about the international code and how we do sprinkler protection things in this state. And according to him, they don't do those things out there. So I was quite amazed. You know, it was really a weird experience.
And that cameraman went and videotaped 2 other exits nobody was using, or apparently hadn't been using.
Well,
I
I think it's a good point is if this isn't a graphic illustration of how when we don't educate people in that herd mentality, the best protection in the world isn't going to work if people don't recognize their surroundings. They all went out the door they came in, they went right out that door. I think it was the drummer of the band that died, wasn't it? Well, he's the one that fell off the stage in the early part of the fire, but I was just amazed how quickly that fire spread to that establishment, but very tragic. Well, that probably should have been last.
Yeah, I was gonna say, yeah. Hope you got a back video. I tell you. Well, I don't have any 16-minute videos, so we'll get to the point, and my trusty assistant here. He's going to help with a few handouts here. I went a slightly different direction than Tom did with this, in talking to Bill, which is probably good. We probably need to hear the same thing over again. But part of that is, if you think about any issue in the Twin Cities, anyone, traffic, entertainment, anything, Minneapolis and St. Paul are very different cities. Not to judge one or the other, just they're very different cities. And obviously there's been a lot of change in Minneapolis, and it sounds like there's going to be some more change, and we'll see what happens there. Now, I've been working for 8.5 years in an environment that hasn't changed much. We have a very mature and stable program, I hope. That's what I think of it. We haven't changed all much. A couple faces have come and go. Bob started in '94, I started in '95. Been the core, I guess, since then. Jason Game, who most of you probably do, joined us somewhere around '98 or '99. I couldn't remember the exact date. He was working with us part-time before that. Jason left in July of '02. We went a full year without that body. So it was just back down to the 2 of us. And on the graph in the bottom, you can see, our workload, was going up tremendously. We lost 33% of the staff, and that same year our workload went up 40%. I'm sure it'd be nice if that was a 7% difference, plus and minuses each other. Not in this case, though. Most of you know in July, we were fortunate enough to rob the stage. Thank you, Dave. I'm sure the banks aren't back. We robbed Katie, and Katie's been, Katie Letourneau Burley's been with us for now a few months, and things are coming along. During that time, while we were without Katie and Jason, we fell far behind. And most of you know, we were heading down a very steep hill. We were at one point 6 months behind in sprinkler plans. We're now about 5 weeks behind. So things we're sending us, are starting to get reviewed a little sooner. Our inspecting. We were getting to a lot of the buildings that were being called for the inspections. We've since changed a little bit, but we fell real far behind in following up on things. We weren't following up on any inspections we really made and trying to nail down these things. Bob, who you know, will be, for the next few months, that's all he's going to be concentrating on is catching up with the things that we've inspected once or twice, finishing up those details. Katie's still going to be doing most of the sprinkler plans, and just to keep the secret, I'll keep doing whatever it is I do. But that means we're not going to get to a lot of buildings. I know some of you called for inspections and things like that, and we don't have the people to get there. It's a people problem. It's not as bad as things are in the other side of the river, but it's politics. We've been fortunate. Politics, in St. Paul has been very proactive, very strong for many, many years. And these two cities didn't get the way they are overnight. So, it's the same politics, and it's amazing how, 100 feet of a river can be that much of a difference. Let's see, codes. We never adopted the 99 code in St. Paul. So when the state finally adopted a new building code and fire code together, it was fortunate for us that the 2002 edition of the sprinkler standard was already out. So instead of trying to learn the 99, only to skip to the 2002, we, by city ordinance, have skipped right to the 2002 codes for everything. I think that's good, especially on the sprinkler standard for, there's a lot of things that are pro-building, pro-contractor, dealing with things like ceiling pockets. We didn't have that option in 99. Or was step ceilings. That's another good one. And further clarifying, so now we're on the same page, but also, I think there's an advantage here. There's some less sprinklers going in that probably under old codes really weren't necessary and thus borne out in the standard. The future page there. God knows what the future is going to bring, except for the politicians. So anything I'm thinking of, politics can change overnight. We're obviously having the same funding problems every other form of government's have. In a different place, we have a debate whether that's a spending problem or a funding problem. That's really not for this organization here. Very little of the politics, and I think you all know this, very little of what we decide to do is based on facts and data. It's all the political wins. I think you all knew that. It's nothing new. It's just a reminder of how things develop and change. Last year, one thing we're considering for the future, and we tried to get it for this year, and that didn't work out because of politics. We're talking about potentially going to a different funding mechanism than straight up permits. Right now, we only charge and issue sprinkler permits. For what it costs to run the three of us with some overhead, we're somewhere in the 30-40% funding range. Which is fine, because direct and sprinkler related, that's probably similar to the percent of the work we do on a day-to-day basis. We talked about coming up with permits for site plans, permits for fire alarm, and they'll come someday. But we decided that we're trying to head in a direction more of like a consulting firm, a rate hour per, come up with a fee, and the hours we spend on the job will be what you're charged on the job. And therefore, we'll always have a funding mechanism. Work grows, fine. We'll have more money as long as I have 40 hours of work for somebody, the money will be there. Now, the politics struck that down last year. We're trying again this year. We'll see what happens. Innovative. We'll see what happens there. And, if we get there, I'm sure I'll be out to probably more to specific groups. I'm the sprinkler organizations and the fire alarm association, which will probably be more effective. We'll keep having that dialogue. I did go to the sprinkler group last year. We talked about that. They were receptive, some concerns, which is good, so we'll work on that. Growth. Apparently there was a recession. We're on the end of it. Didn't see it in St. Paul, which has me concerned because we're recovering now, so I have no idea what's coming. Mayor has this plan for adding 5,000 housing units in his term. They're on track. They're about 2,000 into that, close so far. Now he's taking credit, granted, for projects that started before he was mayor, like the Upper Landing. down on the river there. So with that. However, in preparation for this, I was curious, wanted to know where they were at. And so they're only 2,000 into a 5,000 plant. Well, that means there's twice as much to go in the next couple of years. Looking at their conceptual plan, they have concept for over 8,000 units right now going. Now, none of this includes all the auxiliary or ancillary functions, like grocery stores, like gas stations. None of that stuff has even been talked about. You put 8,000, 5,000, 2,000 more housing units, well, if people need to buy food, they're going to start building grocery stores. They're going to need some place to work. So I think the picture is very rosy in St. Paul for the next few years with these plans. High-rises, you'll like this one, I hope. Our mayor summoned the fire chief to his office shortly after the Chicago high-rise fire a few weeks ago and told the fire chief that he wanted to get all the high-rises in St. Paul sprinkled. That's the political mission that was given. I think it took us a couple days to figure out what to do with that. It's obviously backwards from what you would traditionally hear. We have 98 high-rises in St. Paul. We did an inventory. Where are we at? We found out 68 of them were already sprinkled. Our public housing agency, which has 16 of those buildings, has been on very proactive. They're sprinkling all. I know Futrell's been represented well here. They've been working a lot with them. I think some of the contractors that are here have done some of those. We have 5 that have no sprinklers, and whatever the math is there, the rest are some form. Could be the basement, could be a couple of floors. So we're well on our way to that. But for mayor to call us in and say, "I want these buildings sprinkled," is very interesting. So the message has been heard, at least by some of the politicians in St. Paul. Single-family homes, he threw the chief another one. He wants the single-family homes that are college residents, sure, Minneapolis fire, using that as an example, he wants to figure out what can be done with sprinklers to add them to these homes. Now, unfortunately, we're having a little bit of a, I guess you would call it a debate. The idea was to put a head in the kitchen and a head in the furnace. Well, Steve did some research, and we really haven't had any significant fires start in either of those locations. So we're trying to lobby for more 13D type of 13D type of application. But retrofit situation might be a little difficult. So we'll see what happens with that. But that was the mayor's directive. We have a new chief. He's been with us for 2 months. We had no idea what this was going to be, especially considering the chief we have came from Milwaukee, which has, I guess, no fire prevention bureau. It's done out of the building department. All signs are positive, though. We're very pleased so far. In his short tenure, won't bless him just yet. I'll wait until he's got about 6 months to go before I truly bless him. High standards, I guess. Some of the other things I think for the future is I'm definitely seeing a need for more fire protection advisors, consultants, call them fire protection engineers, what you want. Now, I'm not talking about people who are installing the systems. Case in point, I went to a wastewater treatment plant, the administration building, and they have a pre-action system, God knows why, covers the elevator room, 2 mechanical rooms, and a very, very small computer room. And a computer room that's really not critical to their mission. So they spent this extra money. Then they want to put smoke detectors in. Why are you going to put smoke detectors in HVAC rooms? They're just going to get dirty and false alarm. So now they're talking heat detectors, and they're talking about putting in a room half this size 3 heat detectors. What are you doing that for? Sprinkler head's a heat detector to start with. So no one sat down at any phase of this project and took them through what they wanted. They were concerned about the electrical equipment in the penthouse. So they put a dry system. If anyone has any theories on how that's going to help keep water off of their electrical equipment, feel free, if I can't come up with that. But that's what I mean now. If they had someone that was knowledgeable in fire protection systems, or fire protection for the building, I think they would have gotten a much better product in the end. Now, sprinkler companies can do that. Fire alarm companies can do that. Yeah, there's a fine line between engineering and, design and sticking to codes, but I think there's going to be a need for that. We were actually talking before the meeting a little bit. One other place I see for the future is what we in government call joint powers agreements. I think you start to see more cities pooling their resources on the prevention bureaus to get more expertise. St. Paul serves a population of 280,000 people, residents. Well, the rest of Ramsey County is about the same size. Sounds like they could support a fire protection engineer. St. Paul can. Plenty of work for me, so I don't know why they couldn't. So that kind of, if all those cities got together, having dedicated sprinkler people, dedicated inspection staff, dedicated engineering, that type of thing. And I think you'll see that over the next few years start to happen. Little bit's happening on the suppression side. Next thing, sprinkler operation. I thought you might be interested in some of this. Starting back in the very, very end of '01, but I really want to track the data starting at the beginning of '02, started keeping track of every time water came out of a sprinkler system. I had this theory, this thought, that a vast majority of the time water came out of sprinkler systems because there was a fire. Maybe half. Something like that. Well, unfortunately, my premise was all wrong, as you can see by the numbers. 2002, contact, somebody hitting the sprinkler head with something. Forklift, furniture, baseball, you name it, that type of stuff. Freezing, self-evident, more than half of those are from drill sun-dried systems. Fire, take the bottom ones, aging, things get old, dry systems rotting out. Like that, some equipment failures, a couple of tampers, at least one in a school I remember, and then some what I call design flaws. The system went off because of some design flaw, but not one of them was due to a sprinkler design flaw. One of them was they put a unit heater in a very small closet to add some hot water to a restaurant, and they put it right next to the sprinkler head, which was a 155 foot response sprinkler head. Nobody ever thought about that head might go off, so that's what I mean. Whoever designed to put in that system put it in incorrectly. So, unfortunately, if you take others, aging equipment, tamper, and design flaws, if you take those and add them together, fire is the least probable reason that a sprinkler system can go off. Just here in the end of 2003, I started getting a feeling that there was some other issues going on out there. Just this month alone, we've had 3 sprinkler systems where firefighters show up and nothing's coming out of anything. Don't know why. I haven't really been able to start getting on top of this. So there's more sprinkler alarms going off. The non-operation, you'll see the non-operation that should not have operated. It was a small fire under a sloped ceiling with sprinkler heads under the beams all the way up in the town square atrium. While I put it here as a non-operation, it's not to be considered a flaw. The fire didn't get big enough to set off the heads, and I think it was because of the slope ceiling. The heat was running up to the top. It was like a 30, what's that, Rachel? 30, 40 feet, that ceiling up there. By the time it got to the top, there was nothing left of it. So now when getting to more of the point at which Bill had asked me, talk about our interpretations. We don't have it. 280-something page code is pretty much covers the ground. I don't think we need to write anymore, and that's going to be massively in St. Paul. That's not to say we do things a little bit. Our interpretations basically, follow the code. Call me, ask me. Now I know every one of you out there probably has at least one experience where we were off our rocker. I'm speaking from an idealistic point of view here. We're human, we make mistakes. And that's one of the very important things I think here is remember that your fire marshals, your fire protection engineers on the government side, we're humans. We have no God-given ordainments of anything. We're going to make mistakes. You need to challenge us. You need to challenge any AHJ who's telling you to do something off their rocker. I can only enforce what's in code. I can't make you do anything more that's in code. Now, code might be city ordinances, standards, state codes, etc. So just keep that in mind. Over a couple weeks, I went down and I was listening to the questions. Every Every note here I have is basically a pretty typical conversation which I have with a contractor. What do you want in this building? Don't call me, it's in the code. 1313R is a good example. I am probably the last person that will ever figure out if you need 13 or 13R. I don't see building lines. They're architects that you're bidding from. Now, I understand you have, you're not getting that information from architects. But when you call me and say, I got a 4-story, wood frame apartment building, I have no idea, and I will have no idea until I receive the sprinkler plans, whether that's a 13 or 13R system. I have no way to know that. And I know I frustrate you sometimes, and it frustrates me sometimes that I can't answer. If I knew the answer, I'd give it to you. It's not what I'm playing games. 5 PSI. Some cities, 15 is probably more of a safety factor. That's probably appropriate. As a blanket rule, 5 PSI, we don't use it. I'll tell you what the sprinkler curve is. After almost 9 years, I know what our water system is going to do. We don't have a safety factor. We factor in the safety factors in 13. There's a lot of factors. We don't do that. But I know my water system. If I didn't know my water system, I might be a little more concerned. So in places it's probably appropriate. Woodbury probably 10 pounds short on a day like today. There's no water in Woodbury. In the summer, God knows, I'd love to know how short they come up in the summer. Decks. A deck to one man, to the guy below is an exterior roof or canopy, covered in 13R. Bird cages. I hate them. I'll tell you right now, I absolutely hate bird cages. I think they are the worst vertical sprinkler systems, the worst kind of sprinkler systems to install from a firefighter's and probably a maintenance perspective. Code says you can do it. Go ahead and do it. I understand it's a lot cheaper. I understand this. There's nothing in the code that prohibits until you get to a high rise. We don't build any high rises. And on either side of the city or in the city. So, go ahead, put them in. I have if you know the point, I stare at the building all day out my window. 35-story high-rise, per cage, 13R system. Actually, maybe, I don't know how it was calculated. It was built in like 80 or something like that, after 1980. It's a 35-story bird cage system. It has taken us 18 minutes to find the sprinkler head that was from a fire, this was 5-6 years ago. It took us 18 minutes to find it. Because the smoke detectors never come up. The fire was put out by sprinklers. The occupant that was home was impaired, monitoring about the building, never really communicated that was her apartment coming up. Standpipes. There's another question. It's right in the code. Do you need standpipes or not? I'll tell you one place. If you need a pump, it's 100 pounds. We don't do 65 pounds or anything else. I'll also point out the code that says 4 stories or less, we don't need any pressure on standpipes. State fire chief says. We do make one exception in standpipes in St. Paul. We bring 5 fire pumps to every fire. We can use our fire pumps for standpipes. You can calculate it out so that standpipe at the FPC only requires 150 pounds. I will give you whatever water you need. The fire trucks, they will pump it up, they will use it. So especially in these parking ramps, 5, 6, 8-story parking ramps. Code-wise, 100 pounds at the top, you're obviously not doing it without a pump. I got 5 pumps, they work. Jail. Ramsey County Jail is 6 stories. Sprinklers worked off street pressure. We have no fire pump in there. We'll use our fire trucks if we need the standpipes. Bathrooms, again, figure out which code you're in. Bathrooms are clearly defined. Closets, same deal. Do you need to do closets or not? We're trying to see what your code is. Yes, there's a gray area in closets. You build a 1-foot by 1-foot closet outside of the bathroom, add a sheetrock and put a louvre door on it. Is that a closet? Probably. Now we do the same thing and screw a piece of furniture to the wall that's made out of wood. Somehow it's not a closet. Rich. I'm going to call Rich. I'm hoping someday the committee can kind of get to, the 13 committee can kind of get to some resolution in that and really help us nail down what that is. I think it's ridiculous to put a sprinkler head in a 1-foot by 1-foot closet. Absolutely do. But sometimes, code is what it is. Truss is TGI's. God, 2 and 3 years ago when we started building houses, or apartment building, I think wood frame construction is much harder. Please, somebody give me a high rise. I need to relax a little bit. The trusses and TGIs, I need your help in communicating these issues. What needs to be done to avoid the sprinklers. This last one I was just out on, they were putting in, R13 4-inch insulation in a 16-foot TGI space. Yeah, we filled it with insulation. No, you didn't. Not close. Cut sheets, information. I know here, general information. The clearer you can make the plans, the more cut sheets you send me. We gave up. I threw away all my cut sheet books. Threw them all away last year. I couldn't keep them up to date. They were falling out of date faster than I could update them anyway. Threw them all away. Yes, I know some of them on the internet. Send those things along. I only need one copy. Send them along. Because you know what? If you sent them along, your designers have probably looked at them before they sent them along and maybe caught that one little detail that is going to come back to burn them later on. So I think you'll get burned less. What's interesting is most complicated head out there is probably these attic heads right now. We've all gotten comfortable with the ESFR. These attic heads. Every job using central attic heads, every one of them's coming in with cut sheets with the design they had circled and all the little pertinent details underlined. So I know somebody went over that one, and I don't think I've had yet attic system like that using central attic heads designed correctly. It hasn't happened yet. So, those are some good signs. That's a good sign there. Fire alarms, on the fire alarm, same thing. Do I want a fire alarm in the building? I don't know. Look at the fire code. Make sure you have the state amendments, though. Us fire officials were smart enough to rewrite the whole chapter, pretty much. So having the base fire code isn't going to help you. Make sure you get the state amendments if you already have them. If it says you need a fire alarm in an F occupancy because there's more than 500 people 2 stories up, put a fire alarm system in. If it says otherwise, if you're 1 story or something like that, F occupancy, don't put a fire alarm system. Code compliant. Doesn't matter whether I like it or not. Smokes in hallways. You'll notice a lot of corridors. Most of the smoke detectors that are being put in now are not required by code. Are they a good idea? Perhaps. Perhaps, but that's a decision the owner, the risk takers could be making. Pull stations, same thing. God, I don't even know if manual pull stations are required anywhere, to be honest with you. If an owner wants to put them in, fine. That's a risk. Horns in units. I don't know how you can build an apartment building without putting a horn near you. I haven't seen it in 8.5 years. Code doesn't say it, but I strongly recommend it. I don't know. I call this one tidbits here. This one, things that came off the top of my head, which, again, kind of fall in that category, but they get called. Put the FTC on the address side of the building. That's all we ask. So our firefighters can find it. You'd be amazed. I've been 9.5 years, probably 10 fires a year in sprinkler buildings. I am aware of them using the fire department connection 3 times. Do the math, that's 100 fires, they're using them 3% of the time. They're not finding it, they're not using them, so if we hide them, they're not going to use them even at 3% of the time. We had one fire, not to bash my brothers, but 200 something heads went off in the dust at the paper plant there, paper rock, whatever it is now. Never connected the fire department connection through the whole incident. Tactically speaking, I'm sure the chief had a good reason. I wasn't there. Combined services. I don't know. I've been getting a lot of phone calls lately whether we permit combined services, sprinkler and domestic coming in. I'm not sure why, but we've been permitting them for 5, 6, 7 years. I finally twisted the water utilities on enough. 1 6-inch pipe is probably all you need to serve everything in most buildings. 4-inch in a lot of other places. We have no 4-to-1 ratio in St. Paul anymore. I'm not sure, and that's all of a sudden started coming back up. I've gotten phone calls, yeah, I need a 2-inch supply, does that mean I have to put an 8-inch underground? Or 2-inch domestic, do I put an 8-inch underground? Like, no, where'd you get that? So existing buildings, that's really important as we go to hopefully sprinkle more than that. Early work. Some of you might remember, maybe 3 years ago, we were pretty liberal with early work. We let everybody go to work, just give us our money and go to work. We got back around to it. We tightened that up a couple months before Jason left. Probably really bad timing. We've been asking the contractors in the room, we've been pretty much doing the paper version now. And right now, we want to go to work, your papers and send them home and go to work. But guess what? We're getting close to what we consider a decent turnaround. My boss wants me to do it in a week. We got there once. I can maintain 2 weeks, so we had that discussion. When we get back down there, we're going to ask you for a couple weeks. Just give me a couple weeks to get through the plan. If I don't, then we can talk about our early work. We're going to get back to that. Weed water, every once in a while, we got to play City of St. Paul, and not to pick on Trail too much tonight, but they're trying to sprinkle a single-family home in our city. And between the 3/4-inch underground and being in a poor place, I should say they're trying to sprinkle the building. They're trying to design the sprinkler system for someone else to install. There's no announcement of the new corporation there. So if you got weed water, we'll work with you. But don't send me a plan that shows all 1-inch ground lines and then tell me there's no water for the hose connection, that type of thing. Calls for inspection, please test your systems, make sure they're working before you call us. Pump up your sprinkler system the day before you want me out there. Make sure it's going to hold water. Yeah, you need to leave it on for 2 hours, probably not. But fire alarms, if the phone lines haven't been installed, there's probably not much reason for us to monitor the system. We've found some problems, there. We can do this efficiently. We want to do efficiency. Some of this goes back to, the thoughts on, a different type of fee for service. Well, you'll be in a lot of control to the costs. Good plans, good design, right to the code, it's done, it's tested, and you call us for inspection. We're probably not going to spend a lot of time in these buildings, unless your permit fees are going to be you're not relatively speaking. Elective systems. Building doesn't require a sprinkler system, they want to put one in, it doesn't require a fire alarm system. As far as we consider the standards is no difference from an elective system and a mandatory system. So put it into code. Inspection, licensing, sprinkler inspection. We require the annual inspection done by licensed sprinkler in St. Paul. If you're going out and doing, say, quarterlies and helping out an owner type of thing, who doesn't have the expertise to do some of the more frequent things that are in NFPA 25, although he does. That can be done by someone that's not licensed. So we do require that. And your reports, if you send your report, fire alarm, sprinkler, kitchen hood, whatever, a lot of times guys like to say, well, you could do this, or you should do this. We use those things, and it's more, I think all of you know, and we turn around and write orders to the owner. It would be so helpful if you could tell us they need this. This is a deficiency. This is clearly a deficiency that needs to be corrected versus a wish list. And finally, flow tests. In the city of St. Paul, bounded by the borders of St. Paul, not the St. Paul Water Utility, or St. Regional Water Services as they change their name. Call me, call Katie, call Bob, we'll get you that information. We'll do the tests. I think a lot of you know that. I still get calls very often, and it's mostly out-of-towners, so it's folks that come to the cities once in a while work, or engineers that work thousands of miles away. The same water utility serves Mendota, West St. Paul, Falcon Heights, Lauderdale, Lilydale, Maplewood. If you got a job in there, Dolly gave you her phone number right there, the water utility, she'll take care of. And how she does it, I have no idea. I have no clue whatsoever. Large mains. If you have a 16-inch main in the street, and we're sprinklering a residential building, four-head design. Do we really need to do a flow test? Probably not. Knock a couple pounds off, we'll be good to go in that range. Gotten a lot of weird responses from engineers and designers. Just use a max design of this, knowing what the pressure is in the street. And they're just floored. They don't know what to do with the information. They really don't. And, I talked to enough of them now, they get it. And we have a lot of 16-inch mains. I don't know how that occurred, but there's a lot of big mains out there. Dates, I know some talk about dates. I've finally gotten to the point where dates are relevant. Since I've done tests 3-4 times in 9 years, I get the same results every time. So dates, 5, 6, 7-year-old tests. And you'll get that information from me when you call. I'll say, we don't need to do a new test yet. 6 years old, go ahead and use this design. And almost all of these have safety margins in your designs anyway, so things don't change that much. So that was about it. Those were some of the things that came to mind. Obviously, if you have any questions, I'm here. Anyone that's interested in that operational data, not only did I keep some general quality, but I tried to write down some detailed information about what was the background of each one, and that's available if anyone's interested in it. I didn't use any, I think I used any names in it. So unless you know the building, it's not talking about sprinkler contractors. I kept it neutral there. Or alarm contractors, it's all neutral. So if anyone's interested in that, they'll always be available. And hopefully we'll do a little more as I get back, caught up to all our work as the graph is going in that direction, caught up to our work. We'll start investigating these a little more and we'll get some better data. Hopefully the goal of that whole thing there is to try to figure out why they're going off and try to stop these false ones from going off to get that number down. So, any questions? I know dinner got started late and Tom's video, very, very good, so we got late here. So any questions? Well, I bid you all a good night and safe drive home. Got anything else?
Just one announcement, our next meeting, we're skipping December as usual.